7:03, I think. And welcome. Would you please read the return of the warrant?
To either of the constables of the town of Ashfield and county of Franklin, greetings. In the name of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, we are hereby directed to notify and warn the inhabitants of said town, qualified to vote in elections and in town fairs, to meet at the town hall in said Ashfield on Monday the 13th day of June 2016 at 7 o'clock in the evening, then and there to act on the following articles. And you are directed to serve this warrant by posting up a tested copy thereof at the Ashfield Town Hall and the Ashfield Post Office in said town, 14 days at least before the time of holding said meeting. Hereof fail not and make a complete return of this warrant, as you do say on the town clerk at the time and place of meeting as I said. Given this day in Lord Hands, the 27th day of May 2016, signed by Todd O'Lander, Chair of the Select Board, Thomas Carter, Vice Chair, Ron Fuller. A true copy attested by John LaBelle, Constable, posted 15 days before the date of the meeting as within directed. Pursuant to within the warrant, I have notified and warned the inhabitants of the town of Ashfield of posting up attested copies of the same at the Ashfield Town Hall and the Ashfield Post Office, dated May 28, 2016.
Thank you. Would the members of the front table introduce themselves? How about that? Let's go. I will introduce you. Our town clerk, Nancy Dunn, Casey Warren, our administrator, interim. Thank you. Tom Carter, Vice Chairman, Tom Carter, Chairman, Tom Olenek, Mr. Nobody on the board, Brian Kohler, from the Finance Committee, Carol Legal and Lee Goodgen, and Chair Ted Murray, and two very seasoned new faces on the Finance Committee, Mary Fitzgibbon and Carl Sadler. Thank you very much for you. And thank you all for coming. Did you get a count of how many we are?
I think we're about 28 now, but we don't have
Right. Yeah. I'm just wondering when they have to vote. Yeah. So, I think, does everybody have a copy of the warrant? That's great. Will anybody mind if we don't read the entire article? We can if you want. If one person wants, we will. But otherwise, we waive the reading and just move the question as written. Is that okay with everybody? Mm-hmm. And I'd like to welcome two visitors, to observers of town meeting. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Do I hear a motion on Article 1?
Mr. Moderator,
Chairman Fitzgerald.
I move the town amend the Ashfield zoning bylaws by adopting the proposed revisions as specifically as set forth in Article 1 of the warrant, a copy of which has been distributed at this meeting.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Is there a recommendation from the Finance Committee on this?
Mr. Moderator, there's no recommendation.
Thank you. Could you please give us a brief explanation of what we're being asked to consider today?
It's actually a little funny because for years we had an associate member. When I came on the board, actually when the person before me came on the planning board, and I've been on for almost 2 decades now, we were told, well, we get the select board to give us an associate member. Then when we have a special permit hearing, if somebody has a conflict of interest, the associate member gets called in to vote. So about 2 years ago, somebody said, well, did town meeting ever vote on that like it's required in state law? And nobody can find any record that town meeting ever voted on us having an associate member, even though we had one for a long, long time. And so as a formality, and it could be that we did vote on it 30 or 40 years ago and just nobody can find a record of it, we're asking you to vote on it again and give the planning board the right to have the select board appoint an associate member so that when one of us is sick or ill or missing or has a conflict of interest, we can call in somebody to get a quorum so that we can actually vote on something. How to do that. And that's the explanation.
Thank you. Are there any questions, comments, observations? For those who have copies of your zoning bylaws, I think it's on page 16. under section 8 in administration. Yes.
Does the associate member go to all of
I'm sorry. This is another tradition that we have here. We rise and say our name and where we live.
George Baptist, Bug Hill Road? Does the associate member attend all the meetings? That's just a point of information.
I've never known one to. So they can if they want to, but they wouldn't be empowered to vote on day-to-day stuff, only special permits.
Good question. Thank you. Other questions? Comments? Discussion? This will require a 2/3 vote. So amendment to the zoning bylaw requires a 2/3 vote. I think that there's 27 of us, 29 of us. So I think we're going to have to do it by hand count because we have to certify it, right? Unless you want me to just do a run through and see whether by voice vote
Yes.
it's unanimous. You want to try that?
Sure.
Okay. All those in favor of Article 1 say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? I counted 29. How about you? Exactly. Thank you. Article 2. Is there a motion?
Mr. Moderator,
Chairman Fitzgerald.
I move the town approve changes to the telecommunication facilities section of the Ashfield zoning bylaws as specifically set forth in Article 2 of the warrant, a copy of which has been distributed at this meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
Does the Finance Committee have a recommendation on Article 2?
Mr. Moderator, we have no recommendation on this article.
Thank you. Again, Chairman Fitzgerald, could you give us an explanation?
This is bringing our telecommunication bylaw up to date. When cell towers were first being developed around the countryside, we put together a bylaw regulating them. The FCC has moved on with what their regulations are and what they allow us to regulate, and the technology has moved on. There is a change of definition here in that we could have a special permit for a telecommunications antenna on your roof if it's commercial at this point now. However, federal law would forbid us to really do much other than tell you you can have it. So by defining this differently, it takes this technicality out of, in the first section, out of the equation so that it's less confusing. Camouflage on cell towers has come a long way since we first wrote this law, and what courts have allowed towns to ask for has come a long way in both directions. There's things that we can't ask for and there's things we can't ask for. So we've added in some camouflage language. Setbacks from people's homes, so you don't have that looming effect that cell towers have in residential neighborhoods. There seems to be a lot of people want a bigger setback from public spaces, so we put that in there. And we've also discovered that you now have to have an environmental impact study by national law in order to have a cell tower at all. And so we as a planning board would rather that they finish that homework down in 3 special permit of a NEPA study, National Environmental Policy Act study, or other study. We want that done before we have to have the hearing, and make this very clear. Most of this stuff can be done with the power that we have now, but we are wanting to make it much more clear for both the citizens and the developers where the town stands on these things. Co-location on existing conforming structures shall not require special permits so long as the intent is not make the structure non-conforming. That's actually more a reflection of where FCC regulations have gone. They want us to do co-location, they're requiring it in many cases.
Would you define co-location for us?
2 antennas on the same structure. Thank you. That's a good point. And you can ask specific questions. I think that's enough general stuff for now, but you can ask specific questions if you have any from any of our board members.
This too will require a two-thirds majority. For those of you who are looking at the zoning bylaws, the first definitional portion is on page 6, and then the minimum conditions and special permit submittal regulations are on page 13. Discussion. Yes.
President George Bassett, Bud Hill Road, point of information. Co-location means 2 antennas or 2 or more?
2 or more.
2 or more.
Discussion. Mr. Chandler.
Rick Chandler, Meadow Lane. The 10x height requirement for public school buildings makes me wonder a little bit about Sanderson Academy, which is in an area where there was at least one time talked about being a cell tower installed there on the town highway facility. I don't know if that's still viable or not, but I'm just wondering why 10x is important in that particular circumstance. Pretty much would wipe out that opportunity.
Well, I'm not sure I can speak to that personally because, but some members of the board feel like getting cell towers further from schools was a good thing to do. And other bylaws that have been passed in the Attorney General have done stuff like this. So what would it really hurt is part of that. And part of it is, I think, just my personal opinion, I'm probably correct on this, is the reason we wanted a cell tower at the town barn is because the town owns the town barn, and it would be profit for the town. But with the cell tower locations in the corner, actually covering that area of town, with the Peter Hill Ridge on one side, and the ridge order on the other side, and the high plateau up towards Goshen, it's really not a very good site in terms of the physics anymore in that area to even have a cell tower, as far as I can tell. So that's 2 answers to that question.
Good, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Murray.
Ted Murray on Toronto Road. Is there currently any explicit height limitation on cell towers or other towers of this nature? And if so, does this change any of that or not?
There is a specific height limitation on cell towers in Ashfield that is variable depending on certain conditions. So it's specific, but it's not exactly specific. In other words, I think the height is 80 or 100 feet. And once they go over that height, they have to prove that they're accomplishing a lot more coverage and eliminating the need for more cell towers elsewhere. And in many cases, that's an easy thing to do for another 30 or 40 feet because we have no coverage at all. And but just gratuitously building it higher and higher, 150, 200, is very unlikely to happen. So this doesn't really change that at all. This does keep us from mistaking a 40-foot radio tower in your backyard for a cell tower by very specifically saying things that are as short as height that houses are allowed to be can be.
Further discussion, questions, comments? Are we ready to vote? Want to try to do it without hands first? Try with our voices first? All those in favor of Article 2 as read, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? I counted exactly 30. That was good. Perfect. Article 3.
Mr. Moderator.
Yes, Mr. Lennon. Chairman Lennon.
Thank you. I move the town vote to instruct the select board pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 41, Section 21, to place a ballot question for the annual town meeting as set forth in Article 3 of the warrant, a copy of which has been distributed at this meeting. And the question reads, shall the town vote to have its select board act as the municipal light board pursuant to MGL Chapter 164, Section 55?
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Kohler, second. Is there a recommendation from the Finance Committee on Article 3? Mr. Murray.
The Finance Committee has no recommendation on Article 3.
Thank you. Mr. Lennon, could you explain this?
Yes, so as we move forward towards trying to get broadband, fiber optic broadband in our town, many years ago the town adopted the municipal light plant legislation for our town. We have to have a board that controls the MLB, an MLB to control the project and oversee the operation of fiber in the town, basically. That's not to say that the select board wouldn't, defer that to a committee or something like that, but we're looking for this to pass so that we can set that up once we have fiber. Hopefully have fiber.
I think we have a sophisticated crowd here, but for anyone who might not know, could you explain what the municipal light board is?
I don't know if I could.
Would anybody like to take a shot at it, other than me? Mr.
David?
Holt, would you like to do that?
Mr. Moderator, David Culp, Phillips Road. I will answer the question and then I have some comment as well, if that's okay.
That would be fine.
The MLP is the municipal light plant, and this is a special kind of department that the state has special legislation that authorizes the town essentially to engage in certain kinds of business. It originally was created for generating electricity for municipally for towns, and then it's since been expanded to allow towns to offer telecommunications. And the statute also provides for a municipal light plant board, which is an organization that oversees this business, essentially. So, and it has some degree of autonomy from the rest of the town in the sense that it can decide how to spend the money, the revenues that it draws in and so on.
Thank you.
So my comment about this is it's not clear to me whether my tendency would be to vote no on this measure or suggest that we pass it over because it's not clear that it serves any particularly good purpose at this time. If I understand the current article, the proposal is for in next spring to put a question on the ballot to then ask the town to then later vote at maybe even a separate time. It's not, or at that time. At that time. To create. So we would be talking about creating an MLP board in which the select board would be serving as the MLP board next spring, if I understand this correctly.
Correct. It has to be done at an annual town meeting. It can't be done at this meeting.
Right. So
Annual statute looks like it has, we have to vote to do it no sooner than before 60 days prior to the annual town meeting. So we're doing it now 11 months before the annual town meeting,
right.
which complies with the statute. I just wanted to throw that in.
So if I understand the law correctly, the fact that we don't have an MLP board now, the select board acts as the de facto controller of the municipal light plant without having a municipal light plant board. The law says that a town may create a municipal light plant board, and then it says that that board needs to be an elected group, and then there's this additional section of the law, Chapter 41, Section 21, that says if the town doesn't want to do that, then the select board could serve as the municipal light plant board. But my feeling is that all of this would really accomplish nothing except continue the current state of affairs, which is that the select board oversees the municipal light plant. And we would then be voting next spring to create a board, but the select board would be serving as that board. So, and a lot could be happening over the next 12 months. And in the meantime, we're going to be moving forward with fiber. The select board is probably going to be taking actions and maybe creating an advisory committee which suggests how they should be acting and so on, long before this happens. So my suggestion is that we not vote on this and maybe consider adding it to the warrant no more than 60 days before, no less than 60 days before the next spring meeting, if we feel that it's necessary. But my sense is that it really doesn't change the way that we're currently operating, and might even somehow encumber what we could do in the future if there was a change in legislation, for example, or something that would allow us to create the MLP board composed in a different way.
Thank you. Mr. Carter, you'd like to respond?
Really good point. A little more clarification is that the town voted, what was it, 6 or 8 years ago now, to accept the chapter and verse of having a municipal light plan. But nowhere in there did we say what the governing authority would be on that. I think it's important that we do this. If we have any kind of good luck at all, we won't have another special town meeting to vote on this in the next fiscal year, 60 days prior. Who knows how good luck we'll have doing that. But at the same time, I think it's important that we have a vote to decide who's in charge, who's going to be running it, and who has the authority to make those decisions before we step out and borrow the $2.3 million. It would be a terrible thing to go out and get this project started and then have bond counsel or somebody 2 or 3 years down the road come back and say, well, if you were acting as the municipal light plan and it wasn't formalized. I mean, they have lawyers that do this kind of stuff all the time, and people that look at it that closely. So I understand what you're saying. I mean, we're going to operate. We're going to keep moving forward. This isn't to hold up certainly any progress that can be made and will be made. But it's taken that step to formalize the procedure, so when we get closer to knowing how we're going to finance it, that this isn't a stumbling block to say who has the authority to make those decisions. Certainly, most of you know that I'll take all the authority anybody would assume that I have. But at the same time, I don't know that it would hold us up as we got down the road. Our financing scheme on the broadband as we move forward is we're not really going to go to the bond market or go to borrowing large amounts of money until we're 2, 3, 4 years into the project. So that would be the time we would hopefully have houses lit up when we formally want to be borrowing this money. And there's just no reason to have this stumbling block. And having this vote now or 60 days before the next ballot, I think is kind of a moot point. It's not going to hold us up. It's just going to formalize the procedure we want to use.
Thank you. Further discussion? Mr. Murray.
Mr. Moderator, Ken Murray, Strohacker Road. I would concur with the opinion of Mr. Carter in that while this seems like an unnecessary step to have to take, it is the very kind of thing that I'm concerned that the Massachusetts Broadband Institute, which we're now engaged with in filling out questionnaires, responding to their criteria for the sustainability and the practicality of our approach to establishing a broadband system. They want to know a lot of things, and I'm guessing that this is one of those things that could potentially hang us up by their saying, well, you haven't yet specifically designated exactly who's going to control the municipal lighting plant, and this would make crystal clear the fact that if this is required to be done in an annual meeting, we've done all the homework, And we've got it lined up for just that very purpose. In the interim, of course, the select board would serve as the governing body for the municipal light plant. But it's one of those boxes that gets ticked off, I think, on qualifying Ashfield to be eligible for the money that the Massachusetts Broadband Institute claims is going to come our way. So I would think it's a worthwhile thing to do, and it's true that this gets it out of the way. We don't have another special town meeting between now and the annual town meeting. We've got this laid out, ready to go.
Further discussion? Clerk Dunn just asked me a question. It says to place a ballot question for the annual meeting. Obviously, it's not during the annual meeting, it's the election. So I wonder, just for clarification, it's the date of the annual meeting. I wonder if somebody wants to make a motion to amend.
I'll move to amend.
And that amendment would be for the annual election to be held on the date of the annual meeting.
Yes.
That do it? So the motion is to say the annual election held on the date of the annual meeting. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
The discussion of the motion to amend. Are we ready to vote on the motion to amend?
That was Tom. Tom and Tom.
It was Todd who moved it and Tom who seconded it, right? All in favor of so amending, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The amendment carries. The second, it's my own question here. This is, the motion is that the town vote to instruct the select board as opposed to permit the select board. So if events happen between now and then when somebody wants to serve as a municipal light board, does it still require, if it says instruct, that you place it on the ballot even if there's another, just springing up what Mr. Culp said, that perhaps some board members want to serve as a board and we think it's a good idea other than you.
I'm not sure if I understand. Can you repeat the question?
Sure. If you look at the warrant article, it says to instruct the select board.
Yeah.
Gives you no discretion. So if circumstances happen that maybe we have other people who want to serve as a board, and we think it's a good idea and the circumstances warrant that,
Yeah.
would you still be required to place this on the ballot, like you, the board, serve as the board, even if we were able to convene a board? So maybe the word
This article would require that.
And do we want it to require that even if we had the possibility to have another board?
Yes.
Okay, that was my question.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, if the, just as a clarification, if the universe spun out of control, and there was a dream that there would be a better board to handle the financing and to make those decisions, then what we would do is repeal Article 60 days before the election. We would have to repeal this, but we'd have to know 60 days in advance to get it on the ballot because we have to have that.
That's why I'm just wondering, if instead of the word instruct, it said to authorize the select board, rather than directing the select board. Wouldn't that give you more latitude? Casey, you have it?
Mr. Moderator?
This is Tom.
Town council wants to instruct?
Yes. Those were her words.
Yes. Mr. Cole?
To that end, if the universe changed and the legislation, for example, was changed to allow us to create a different kind of board between now and then, we wouldn't need to strike it. We would just vote no if we wanted to at that election.
Right.
It's a good point.
Advance a different article.
It's a good point.
And we would have something else perhaps in addition for its replacement.
That would put it off another year before the decision is made.
We got it on the.
Well, to be
Hang
clear,
on, let's have it.
Sorry.
Okay, Mr. Carter, you wanted to say that would put it off another year?
If they voted no at the annual ballot, and you have to vote this on an annual ballot, they would put the decision off for another year.
Yes, but my understanding of the law is that what the restrictions for the annual ballot is specifically to this part of the legislation that allows the select board to become one of various different kinds of boards, like the Board of Health, the Municipal Light Plant, etc. And that's what has to happen at an annual town meeting. If we decided that we wanted to create an elected board, for example, you might remember that the council, the MLP council, said that we could just set that to happen at any next election. We could create such a board. Or if the legislation was changed that allowed the select board to appoint a board, which is what I think many of us originally wanted, you could do that in the meantime, and then ultimately vote this down because it was no longer needed. That's my reading of it.
Well, Mr. Atlantic wanted to say something, then I'll get back to Mr. Carter.
Or we could have an additional warrant article added to the annual town meeting question, a different question.
Sure.
We could vote that yes and vote this no. So as long as it was 60 days ahead of time, we could get it on there. We could rectify it at that point, and it wouldn't have to wait another year.
Okay, Mr. Carter.
Yeah, the decision making, just to inform everybody else, and this is the way my thought process works as we sorted through this and trying to get the financing in hand and make these decisions, is that we talked about, as David said, we talked about another elected board and that sort of thing. And at that time, the big board was out here with everybody that was nominated at caucus, you know, and people really aren't nominated for positions in town. My feeling is they're coerced, you know. and to say that there would be another 3 or 5 people that would have to be coerced into for an elected position in our community when everybody's so busy. Everybody that wants to be busy certainly is busy, which is a great thing. But at the same time, the financing and generating revenue and having an idea of where that revenue is going, and the select board, as the chief financial officers, executive officers of the town, need to have some type of control on that. One of the things that made me really feel that the select board needed to be in control is last winter, summer, fall, winter, when we had meetings on trying to put this together, was talking about the MLP and that revenues come in, and if there was a separate MLP, the select board would have to ask the MLP if they had extra revenue to allow the town to tap into that and use it. So as the select board is the MLP, there probably wouldn't be a lot of asking and that sort of thing. But at the same time, we could structure our debt and structure our revenue and make those decisions so it all worked out in our budget process. So for those reasons, I think it's important that the select board at least be heavily weighted on the MLP board. And at this time, like I said, trying to get people or making more positions that people, you know, when it's brand new, people might be pretty excited to be on the MLP board, but 20 years from now, it may not, or 10 years, or, you know, as soon as the shine is gone, it may not be the thing that people are just running out there to be on that board. So I think it's a responsibility that can be handled pretty easily, or as easily by the select board as any other board in town. So.
Thank you.
Question, Judy Housewatt, the Street Corner Road. Could you not then invite an associate member with some expertise in the field And you could manage the money part, and then you could have somebody that really understands what's going on.
I think we would certainly set up some sort of an advisory committee that would kind of direct all of this without having to have elected positions.
Further discussion? Are we ready to vote? Anybody need for me to read it again? You all have it, right? All those in favor of Article 3 as amended, which says annual election held on the date of the annual meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
One no. Any abstentions? It passes. Thank you. Article 4, is there a motion?
Mr. Moderator.
Mr. Carter.
Mr. Moderator, I move the town vote to transfer from vocational expense $4,000 to the information technology account.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Kohler. Is there a recommendation from the Finance Committee on Article 4?
Mr. Moderator, as noted on the warrant here, it's recommended by the Finance Committee unanimously 5-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. Is there an explanation, Mr. Carter?
Technology is supposed to save us so much. I mean, that's how it was brought to us probably 30 years ago when we put the first computers in, and it seems like all we've done is spend money on them. But we know that the technology changes and so forth. What we need to do, we've appropriated money for the next fiscal year to upgrade some computers and some servers and that sort of thing. But what we have right now is a server that is giving the office staff just huge amounts of headaches when they come in the morning and they can't retrieve the information that they need and get to their work. When you've got people that come into the office and can't get to their work, that's pretty expensive too. So what this is to supplement the information technology account so we can get some of the needed repairs and replacements done in this fiscal year. Get it done now and you have it paid for prior to the end of the fiscal year.
Thank you. Discussion? Questions, comments? We're ready to vote? Okay, this one requires a simple majority. All those in favor of Article 4 as read, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Article 4 passes unanimously. Is there a motion on Article 5?
Mr. Moderator,
Mr. Kohler.
I move the town vote to transfer from vocational expense $10,000 to fund fiscal year 2016 appropriation shortage in the general highway expense account.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Carter. Thank you. Is there a recommendation by the Finance Committee?
And Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommends support of this article by unanimous vote 5-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. Mr. Kohler, is there an explanation?
Basically, these are highway expenses that have been incurred and not anticipated, mostly equipment related.
Discussion?
Mr. Moderator?
Mr. Carter.
I didn't mention it in the last article where we transferred from vocational expense, and this one also is taking money from vocational expenses. So a year and a half ago, we made up a budget for this fiscal year on what it was going to cost to send our vocational kids. We're under budget, and a lot of that has to do with the hard work that David Newell put in on the Finance Committee on trying to get transportation and so forth. and the tuition bills and some students not going to vocational school that we originally anticipated. So it'll be close to $140,000 less than what we budgeted. It's not by any stretch of the imagination that we over budgeted so that we have this money. But good management and managing fuel prices in a down market and that sort of thing, you know, a few thousand here, a few thousand there, after a while it amounts to quite a lot of money. So, I just wanted to mention that how
I
much
think
work
that's
that
important.
David put
Thank you,
into
and
that.
it would be nice if the minutes reflected our gratitude to Mr. Newell for all of that work and the availability of these funds. Discussion, Article 5. You guys are easy. No questions, no comments? Okay, all those in favor of Article 5 as read, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Article 5 passes unanimously. Article 6. Ms. Howe, we're going to... Ms. Howe, are you prepared to make a motion with respect to Article 6?
I am Judy Houghton, Spruce Corner Road, and I am pleased to withdraw this request for funding. 3 weeks ago, Casey and I had a conversation when she was putting the warrant together, and I was many $1,000s short. And I'm pleased to report that as of yesterday, we have raised an additional $5,236, and we will not be requesting money from the town at this time.
Good news indeed. So, as is our tradition in Ashfield, we'll treat that as a motion to table this motion, which is putting it on the table indefinitely. If who knows why we ever had to bring it off the table, we would have to do that. So, is there a second to Ms. Howe's motion to table?
Second?
Second, is that Mr. Cohen? To table a motion is, requires a 2/3 majority, is non-debatable and non-amendable. So, all those in favor of tabling, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? I think we got our 2/3 of 130 voices exactly. I'd like to thank the Park Commission for all the work and how
Say that since January 1, we have raised over $15,000 for the dock. And I never want to have to do this again.
Great, we're living in great time. Now I can do my triple. Great. Article 7, is there a motion?
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town vote to transfer from vocational expense up to $10,000 for a classification and compensation study.
Second.
Second by Mr. Kohler. Is there a Finance Committee recommendation?
Yes, Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommends support of this article by a unanimous vote of 4-0 to 0.
Thank you. Mr. O'Hara, could you give us an explanation of this?
Yeah, during the budget process this winter and spring, I don't want to speak out of turn for the Finance Committee, but the Select Board, we were struggling with our compensation of town employees, whether we were at proper compensation levels, if we were too high, too low. We really have no idea. And every year, we're just kind of throwing a dart at the dartboard by giving COLA increases and not really sure if we're
Called a cost of living.
cost of living allowances, not really sure if we're competitive with surrounding communities, and this study is going to help rectify that by giving us benchmark information from surrounding areas, comparable towns, letting us know whether we're on track or give us advice as to what we should do.
Thank you. Discussion. Yes.
George Basmus, Bug Hill Road, point of order, or not order, point of interest information. What is classification refer to?
I'm sorry?
What does classification refer to? That's in the motion.
So basically the job description, which job class which different jobs fall into, job classifications. Okay. So they're trying to study comparable jobs from different towns, making sure that the title matches what the job description is.
Another good question. Thank you for that. Yes, Colin.
Nina Kohler, Bailey Road. Who performs the study?
We have we went out for requests for quotes and we had 2 responses. One is from the UMass Edward J. Collins Center for Public Management. They gave us a proposal, as well as D.I. Jacobs Management Consulting Services. They both made proposals to us.
Another good question, Mr. Chairman.
Rich Chandler, Meadow Lane. A few years ago, some years ago now, time passes, we tried to do this on a more or less regular and voluntary basis, the select board did.
Right.
The biggest issue was there was very little comparability from one town to the next, and I'm wondering whether these consultants are aware of that ahead of time, coming from places like UMass, and when our comparables are places like Holly and Ashfield, Conway and Deerfield that are very, very different. Job descriptions are different. Time is different in terms of part-time, full-time. Is that all, are they pretty confident they're going to be able to deal with that?
That's exactly the kind of work that they do. You know, they look at that, they look at not only surrounding towns here in Franklin County, but also comparable size towns across the region, across the state. So, yeah, I think so. They're used to digging into it, making sure that they're comparing apples to apples. And that's, yeah, and that's one of the things that we didn't feel we could do ourselves. Because it takes a lot of work and a lot of digging to understand whether, you know, someone's job title in this town is really what do they really do. It takes a lot of time to go out and study them, do questionnaires, etc. That's what these consultants do.
So they're prepared to spend quite a lot of time in little town halls instead of just looking at some summary statistics someplace.
Right. Yep, actually going out, interviewing employees from different towns, etc.
Good.
Thank you. Another good question.
I mean, Mr. Sullivan, over there. I see you, Mr. Cullen.
Can you say what the dollar amounts were for the 2 quotes so we can compare that to the authorized amount?
Yeah, the proposal from the UMass Collins Center came in at 10.5, and the proposal from D.I. Jacobs came in at 5, and then they had some more discussion with us and upped it to 10. And the select board, you know, we convened our meeting at 6:30, had some discussion amongst ourselves, and want to work with the consultants on the proposals to whittle them down by taking out maybe some unnecessary components of their proposals.
We could hire a consultant to see what consultants.
Yeah, right. We have to have a study first.
Eric Hoffner, Ashfield Mountain Road. Is it your sense that doing a study like this will actually has the potential to save the town money? So knowing compensation levels, we don't overcompensate or something along those lines. Is that the point?
I think the point is we don't know. I think that's the problem. We don't know if we're overpaying, underpaying. We just don't know. Yeah, sorry. Moderate. Do your job.
Yes, who do I have?
I'm Jenny Markins, 597 Douglas Road. Having worked on the personnel board during this past year, I would suggest that this is probably wonderful due diligence for the town. Just on a forward-going basis, we had some explorations of other towns' positions, and it really does get quite confusing and difficult to manage. So I'm in support of this.
Thank you. Mr. Cutler.
Jim Cutler, Beverly Road. Did they give any sense in your interviews with them on the longevity of these studies? In other words, we'll get this information and we'll be able to say at a point in time that, okay, we need to make an adjustment up, down, or sideways, and then it will be basically current in terms of other towns, but did they give a sense of the longevity of these studies? Like how long will we be able to utilize the data in this study to help us do proper compensation, or do we fall back to what we've been doing with the study as our new baseline?
I have it on good advice that it's 8 to 10 years.
Really?
Yeah, 8 to 10 years is the expected longevity.
Okay. Good question. Further questions, comments, discussion? We ready to vote? All those in favor of Article 7 as read, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Article 7 passes unanimously. As always, so grateful for all the hard work that these boards do, and everyone else does, and everyone. And you, thank you so much for coming out. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you for being in the